Let's talk about what you do a half hour after half hour. My name is Kent, and this is your half hour call.
Attention cast and crew, this is your half hour call. Half hour to the top of the show. Half hour.
Alrighty friends, we are back with yet another episode of the Almost Complete Guide to Stage Management, and today is part 2 about calling the show. Last week we talked about the theory behind creating an effective calling system, so if you missed that, click here and watch that first, then come back so we can talk about putting that theory into practice. Plus, stick around until the end of the video where I'll share with you my top 5 tips for calling a successful show. But if this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Kent, and you are watching Half Hour Call, where we're dedicated to shining the spotlight on technical theater. So if you want how-to videos, interviews with industry leaders, and insider theater updates, make sure you hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss another video. Theory is all well and good, but how can we take that and put it into practice? Learning to call a show takes practice and hands-on experience, but hopefully this will still give you a good place to start. Speaking of places to start, let's talk about creating the call script. The call script is a copy of the script in which you write the cues. Some stage managers prefer to just write cues into the blocking script, but about a 2/3 majority prefer a fresh copy. For musicals, this fresh copy will likely be essential because you'll have to add space for dance breaks and musical interludes. The good news is you don't have to start from scratch. Your typed blocking script is probably 90% complete, you just need to add and change a few things. First, let's talk about musicals. Specifically, let's talk about dance breaks. Some stage managers like to include pages of the piano vocal score into their call script. This script and score combination is often referred to as a scorpt. Now, if you're stage managing an opera, you'll have to call off the score, but for traditional musical theater, it is not required. In fact, since the ability to read sheet music isn't a requirement to be a stage manager of a musical, I don't like to add score pages even though I can read music. For one, there is way less room to write in a score, and it creates more unnecessary page turns. Also, not every stage manager can read music, so not relying on a score makes it more helpful for coverage and replacement stage managers. So instead, we add dance counts, 5, 6, 7, 8, and all that jazz. Generally, you've been in the room as the choreographer has taught the dance anyway, so you should be pretty familiar with how it's counted. You can also ask the choreographer or the music director to help you count out a tricky section if needed. I add these dance counts interspersed with the lyrics, and for multiple counts of 8, use the ones place to count the number of 8s. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 3, 2, 3, and so on. For long dance breaks, you'll probably want to split it up into sections, either based on the music or based on the staging and choreography. You'll also want little identifiers to help you keep track of where you are in the music. If certain beats are emphasized, and I anticipate there'll be a light cue there, I'll bold that particular number. Here's an excerpt from a blank call script I created for the Charleston number from Jerome Robbins' Broadway for a showcase I was working on. It's completely a dance piece, so it's perhaps the most extreme example of this. Check out how the notes sometimes correspond to the choreography and sometimes to the music, depending on what's most helpful in the moment. Another thing you may want to add are some additional stage directions. When we first typed out the script, we were focused on making it as close to the original copy as possible, and now the time has come to make it as useful as possible. Is there a large bit of business between lines? Add it in. You don't need every detail, but landmark blocking moments, especially ones that either propel the action without words or could conceivably affect cues, should probably be added. On the other side of the coin, feel free to remove any stage directions that don't reflect the actual blocking of the show. The final thing to add to your call script is space. Give yourself some extra room on the side of the page that you want to write cues, which for most stage managers is the right-hand side. It can also be helpful to preemptively add space for scene changes and add some additional room on the first page of the script to add your warnings and your top of show cues. Now that we've made our call script, it is time to fill it with cues. This is what a cue will generally look like. All of your cues will be written in the same margin with a line connecting the department and identifier to the go or the trigger. Departments are abbreviated, with these being my abbreviations of choice. You can box in the trigger or just add a little caret like you see here. I prefer the caret because it allows you to get super specific about where you call the cue. If the go is based on an action, I'll write the action onto the line, usually with a with symbol or an at symbol. The same thing applies if I'm taking the cue off of a deck stage manager's clear. I will add that to the line itself. I actually don't write the word go into my call script at all. To me, the line itself is the go. So if multiple cues happen at the same time with the same go, I'll write all of them above that same line. But if they're a follow cue where they're called one after the other, there will be two separate lines connected like this. And if they're an auto follow cue where it automatically moves on to the next cue, I'll add it beneath the line in parentheses. That way I know it's there and that it should still happen, but I know not to try and call it. Warnings and standbys generally get written in after all the cues themselves have been added to the script. For me, boxes go around warnings and standbys get put in quotation marks to remind me exactly what I'm supposed to say in the standby. Writing in cue lights is a little different. If there are multiple cue lights for the same department, like often happens for flyrail or automation, you'll need to specify which color cue light is being used for which cue for the technician and which switch corresponds to that light for you as the stage manager. Generally, this reads department, identifier, color, and cue light number with a box around it. Depending on your technicians, for a warning you may need or want to include a description of what will actually be happening in the cue as well. Some stage managers like to put cues on post-it notes to be able to move them around freely during tech. I am firmly on team no sticky notes because if you get one good gust of wind, your cues are going everywhere. In order for me to feel good about using sticky notes, I'd have to tape them into the book, and then you just defeated the entire purpose of using sticky notes. As far as I'm concerned, just stick with a pencil. Let's take a brief detour and discuss digital call scripts. They're beautiful, they are easy to read, and they're possibly a huge waste of time. If you have a short run, a clean handwritten call script is more than enough. What's important is having a backup. On opening night, scan your script so that there's a PDF copy in existence in case your Morning Joe happens to end up all over your call station. And don't worry, I didn't jinx anything for myself because I don't drink coffee. However, a digital call script can be great if you have a longer run, anticipate a remount, or have a team of stage managers that rotate calling the show. You can simply create the script in Microsoft Word using text boxes and shapes to add the cues. This takes a while, so I actually use my iPad to notate a PDF version of the call script using an app called Notes Plus. What's great about the app is that it can convert handwriting into text and snap drawings into shapes, which makes digitizing your call script an absolute breeze. I'll usually aim to finish up the digital call script within the first full week of full performances. Some stage managers will create a digital copy from day one and call off of an electronic device. My gut is way too suspicious of technology to do this, but my brain sees why it's not actually that big of a risk. We already rely on computers to run so much of our show, like lights and sound and automation, that technology malfunctions would already bring a production to a grinding halt. And in fairness, I've had light boards crash much more frequently than my personal iPad does. However, I would still feel the need to have a physical copy as a backup, and at that point I might as well just call off the physical copy anyway, so for now I will be sticking with my paper call scripts. Sitting down at a call station for the first time can be really intimidating. The most important thing when calling a show is to remember to breathe, figuratively and literally. And remember the 3 C's: consistency, confidence, and control. Consistency is important at every scale. Consistency between shows is crucial. Consistency in your volume, no matter the energy of the scene, is important. There's kind of a natural tendency to whisper during quiet scenes and speak louder during musical numbers, but your voice is going right into people's ears. Consistency in your rhythm, leaving the same space before the go. Consistency in the order in which you name departments for simultaneous cues or long warnings and standbys. Consistency, consistency, consistency. Confidence is equally important. If you're unsure or hesitate when you're calling a cue, then the technician will be unsure and hesitant in taking their cue. Saying the word go with confidence and making it G-O period rather than G-O question mark is one of the smallest but simplest ways to improve your calling and make it more precise. Listen for yourself. Light 7, go, versus Light 7, go. Hear the difference? And finally, control. And by control, I don't mean that you're ruling over technicians with an iron fist. I mean that you are in control of the cues are not in control of you. Generally, this comes down to trying to fit too much into your mouth at one time. So prioritize what needs to actually be said in the moment. Again, listen to the difference. Lights 20, go. Lights 21, go. Lights 22, go. Lights 23, go. Versus standby lights 20 through 23. Lights, go. Lights, go. Lights, go. Lights, go. Along the same vein, as soon as you're able, start looking up from your book and watching the show as you call, either in front of you or through monitors. You'll feel more connected to the rhythm of the show and the audience, and you'll discover the difference between calling the show and calling the cues. Next week, we'll look at some examples at which time they will show up here, but for now, check out this video of calling the Ratatouille musical to see it in action. And now it is time for my top 5 tips for calling a show. Tip number 1 is to hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Okay, maybe that's not the first tip, but you should still do it. Tip number 1 is actually to put the words standby and warning before you name the cues you're standing by. This way, the technicians aren't having to guess whether you're calling a standby or a go, and are therefore less likely to jump cues. So instead of lights 38, standby, it would be standby lights 38. Tip number 2 is to bring back our 2 themes of flexibility and prioritization. If you are stressed about a complicated cue sequence, reassess your priorities. If you're calling anything potentially dangerous like pyrotechnics, automation, or rail cues, those cues take precedence over things like sound and lights. Put your focus on the dangerous cues and the rest will fall into place in time. I would rather call a light cue wrong every single night of a run than call an automation cue wrong once. Tip number 3 is to practice. Especially if you're coming into a show as a replacement, practice becomes really important because you don't get to go through the tech process and learn the call of the show. More than likely, you'll observe a few times, be observed a few times, and then you're on your own. For cue-heavy shows, taking the call script, an archival recording if one is available, and a fake cue light system can make the difference between a successful handover and a rough couple of shows. Binder clips make great and, more importantly, cheap fake cue light systems. You can even clip them right to the top of the laptop you're watching the recording from and keep everything nice and neat and organized into your little fake calling station. Tip number 4 is specifically for musicals. Dance, move, groove, conduct, do something to feel the beat. One thing I've taken from my training as a performer is to lightly tap my chest in time to the music. This helps internalize the beat and keeps you from rushing when counting. For musicals, especially contemporary, flashy, spectacle musicals, being in the pocket of the music will make the difference between a good show and a great show. The audience may not know it, but they can feel when it's off. Dancing and moving can also help you figure out when to say go and really nail down the concept of that consistent beat before. This is especially helpful for complicated or syncopated rhythms that are tricky to count and tricky to call. And tip number 5 is to see as much theater as you can. Calling a show requires an intimate understanding of theater as an art form, and you need to know how an audience laughs, how an audience applauds, and what different silences feel like. Even when a show isn't a musical, there is still a rhythm to it, and to call the show, you need to be tuned in to that rhythm. And the only way to do that is to get out and see theater, and if you can, shadow a stage manager calling the show. What are your tips for calling shows? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for liking, commenting, and subscribing. My name is Kent, and this has been your half-hour call.
Find the perfect gift for the stage manager in your life at the Half Hour Call store. Now with free shipping on all domestic orders. New products added frequently. Visit KentJamesCollins.com/store to shop now.